Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Wellness Project with Des. Thanks so much for tuning in today. I'm so excited because we have a return guest. Yes, Jose Burgos is here today talking about his new book. He's now a first time author, his book, Derailed. Jose was on episode 7 in season 1, so definitely go back and check out that episode. I always love talking to Jose. He always has so much wisdom and words of advice for people, which I really appreciate. And I think you will too. So let's talk to Jose. I'm so excited to have him back on. Jose, thank you so much for joining me again. Welcome back.
Oh, thank you for having me, Des. This is always a pleasure to talk to you. This is going to be great.
I'm so excited. So, Jose Burgos is the founder of Spotlight Coalition and now first time author.
Yay.
Yes. So, your book is called Derailed. Tell me all about it. What inspired you to write this book?
Yeah, so Derailed kind of came from, me writing down in my musings, my journal. But what really inspired the book was I was always intrigued by Stephen Pressfield's The Art of War, where he talks about resistance being this like invisible kind of opponent that we have to face every day. Now, in his situation, he was talking about procrastination, but I figured there's something that always happens to me personally that is more of a derailment, right? Where it's like I'm on my beat, I know what I want to do, I have a bunch of ideas, I'm on life's path, quote unquote, and then something or many things knock me off of that path. And then I find it very hard to rebound. So I kind of gave that feeling of derailment sort of the same thing, sort of like an invisible force that we kind of face every single day. And 10, pretty much chapters, 10 strategies, 10 tactics to kind of how I battle that and how I'm able to bounce back and continue to stay on life's beat, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I read Derailed and I resonated with so much of it because I feel the same. I have that, I'm in a good flow. And then, as you said, something in life happens or I get busy or work, whatever. And, as you mentioned in your book, COVID, obviously, in the world shutting down, like you just get derailed and get out of all your habits and practices. So, who exactly is this book for then?
I would argue it's for everybody. I mean, this is one of those things where whether you realize it's happening or not, some people correlate it to depression, some people correlate it. And if you really dig a little deeper, you will see that the reason you're upset, the reason things are not going your way is because you've been derailed from your beat, from your mellow point, your comfort spot in life. So I would argue that is for everybody. But selfishly, as I was writing the book, like the introduction when I spoke about COVID and my routine and how I would go to the gym and all that. Those were basically the stuff that I was writing in my journal. So really selfishly, the book is for me. But as I was writing more and more, there was people around me that were saying, hey, I feel the same exact way. And it helped a bunch of people around me. So yeah, it's one of those double things where to answer your question, it's for everybody because I go through it. But this is kind of a selfish thing where I wrote it for me.
No, that's great. And I love that you wrote it for you, but you felt like you could share it with other people. Cause like I said, I did resonate with it. As I
Awesome.
was reading, I was like, oh, yeah, that sounds like me. And, I think in general, we talked about this on the last episode that you were on is that, I feel like me and you are very similar. We have kind of similar energies in that way and habits and things like that. So, yeah,
Yeah.
as I was reading it, I was like, oh my gosh, I totally get this. So if I resonated with it, then I know other people will as well.
Yeah, and then if whoever reads the book in the introduction, you will see that kind of style, right? Where I'm writing, me, right? And then eventually, as I go into these steps, I started to drift away from me and figure out that I'm just another person. I'm going through this with you. So instead of saying me, let's talk about us. And then the language throughout the chapters changes to we. And we must do these type of things. And we, because I wanted everybody to come along for the ride. But you'll definitely notice that transition from introduction to the actual book where it's like Jose's writing to himself about himself, and then Jose's writing with everybody with him going along for the journey.
So, in the intro, you explain the difference between routines and practices.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I have a favorite author named Ryan Holiday, and he talks about practices. And practices are things that are non-negotiable in life, right? So what I found, especially when COVID-19 hit, which is where the introduction takes us, what I thought were practices, which were, being fit and getting up early and doing, creative reading and writing and stuff like that, those are more routines. And what I came to find out is routines are very brittle because routines depend on timing. Sometimes that depend on location, right? Like I didn't feel like I was getting a good workout unless I was at the gym with the
Mm.
same people that I see every morning, those type of things. And when it comes to a practice, since they're non-negotiable and they're more like, pillars in your life, you don't have to rely on being at a certain place. I feel just as good working out at 6 in the afternoon, in my basement here in the gym that I have, than being in front of all those people at 6 in the morning. And it's because it's a practice. But if it was a routine, then everything would go wrong, right? I'll be at home. The workout wouldn't be comfortable. I'll make excuses for why I'm too busy to do it, et cetera, et cetera. And little do I know is because the situations, the parameters that make it a routine are not adding up. And that throws me off.
That makes so much sense. I never thought about it that way before because I try to get into those healthy habits,
Yeah,
that nighttime morning routine. And sometimes I do, I just get messed up and I try to read every night before bed. And, I guess I realized because if I go to bed a little later or come home later, whatever, I don't read. So I realized that is more of a habit than a practice. So I
right.
really, yeah, so that made a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, practice is, I mean, and there's a thin line, right? A lot of people, that's why you probably would ask the question, but that's really what it is. Like reading to you could happen on the way to work on an audiobook, right? Reading could you be on the 30-minute break that you have. I actually do that in my day job. When I have my lunch, I pull out a book, a physical book, to get away from having something in my ear at all times. But that's not dependent on lunch. I can do that when I get home. I could do that before bed. And it's because reading is a practice to me. It's a pillar of my life as opposed to just a routine that I do to get better.
Definitely. I'm definitely going to have to shift that mindset more into a practice because I do get thrown off if a habit that I'm trying to do each morning or each night if it doesn't happen. So I'm definitely going to try to shift to that. That was really good. Chapter 1, I really liked how you talked about how Da Vinci had so many unfinished projects. He had notebooks full of notes and ideas. This chapter really struck me because I start so many things and I struggle so much to finish them. Like I was even telling you before we started recording, I have so many Google Docs like written with ideas, but I just haven't finished them. I have dozens of half-written scripts, half-made ebooks and workbooks and
Right.
blog like half-written blogs. So actually because it's been such a big struggle and obstacle for me, I made my word of the year fruition because I just want to finish something. I want to have, I want an idea to come to life. So I really
I love
liked
that.
that you talked about that in chapter 1. So can you tell us a little bit more about chapter 1?
Yeah, so I chose to highlight Da Vinci in this chapter because I read Walter Isaacson's biography on Da Vinci. It was fantastic. But the gist that I was able to get through the whole thing is that it's not to take away from his greatness. It's not to take away from all the things that he, provided for us in the arts and in science. It's the fact that I started to try to think about who the person Da Vinci would have been if he would have focused on one thing. Right. So he
Mm-hmm.
took, very long to do some of his famous work. He had to get threatened in order to finish the famous Last Supper. Like this was a guy that was extremely, like me in nature, which is he procrastinated a lot. And his form of procrastination was not maybe like unhealthy eating or anything simple like that. His form of procrastination was, hey, let me flow on to this next thing so that I don't have to address this one thing that's really hard to do or really hard to overcome. Right. And just like you, I feel the same exact way. I have a bunch of stuff that I've started before. I used to be into music. I used to make music. I used to do audio. I've written books. I've done everything you can think of. And as I get older, I start to realize that, yeah, I'm a generalist and I know a lot of things, and that's helped me get to this point. But at the end of the day, who Jose would have been, or who Da Vinci would have been, or who Des will be if she would just kind of nail in on one thing, focus in on one thing, and go 100% on that one thing. And that's kind of what that chapter is around. We waste a lot of time, better lack of a term, dicking around, right? Like we're just floating around,
Mm-hmm.
and it may not always be a bad thing, but most of the time, at least for me, it's usually that I'm procrastinating from doing something extremely difficult, and I want to go learn something else so I could kind of alleviate myself from that.
Yeah, definitely. And so you brought up also dabbling in a lot of different hobbies.
Yeah.
And so that I think a lot of people can resonate with also because I think there's a lot of people that are multi passionate. And so they're passionate about like traveling or crafting or writing or I don't know, all these different photography, all these different things. And I'm like that. How is it beneficial for people to focus on one thing? And what is your advice for people who are multi-passionate that have all these different hobbies and are just curious about everything in the world and want to experience everything? What's your advice for those people?
As long as you have discerned what is work and what is hobby, that is perfectly fine. I mean, I'm not here to tell anybody that they can't enjoy their life, they can't enjoy their hobbies. That is extremely unrealistic, and I wouldn't even try to meet up to those expectations. But in a world where we want financial freedom, right? In a world where we don't want to punch in and work 9 to 5 unless we want to,
Mhm.
in a world where we want to, conquer, if that's a better use, and pass on generational wealth and all these things that are great for our legacy. In order for us to do those things, we need to contribute something of value to the world. And what happens when we have a lot of different hobbies is we could never concentrate that value that we pass forward. So we're scattered all over the place. That can lead to happiness, and that's fantastic. But let's figure out which one of these things is the work, right? Like in Da Vinci's example, we could forget about the tanks, we could forget about the submarines and like the scientific meats, and let's go back to the painting and let's get focused on that. And that's his work. And then he could dabble and do all these other things. So to me, it's just a balance, as many things are. The benefit of not dabbling around is that you're able to concentrate your energy and give that value so that you can make it work. Everything else is just for fun. I mean, you could do as many things as you want. They may even help your work, which is the irony of the situation. Like if I shoot really good video and I do podcast, then I could do a really good video podcast for YouTube just because of those experiences. I actually think David Epstein, I believe is the name. He wrote the book Range. I think that's it. I could get both of those wrong, but he makes a very valid argument why the people that are generalists conquer the world because they can mix fields together. But in the example that
Mm.
I'm trying to focus on is that it's, hey, if we dabble around too much, if the rapper turns into a producer and then turns to an engineer and then turns into an A&R, we're never going to know what type of musician that guy could have ever been because he keeps dabbling around and he keeps wasting
Hmm.
time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. That makes a lot of sense. And so another part of that is distractions, right? Especially now with social media, every streaming service. It's so easy to, come home from your 9 to 5 and put on the TV or listen to unlimited podcasts. There's just scroll social media endlessly and there's always new social medias coming out. So what is your advice to people on how they can limit their distractions?
Lean on your practices for sure. See, this is the situation. The difference between the person that says they don't have time to read and the person that comes home from work and instead of scrolling gets their practice in, right? They read.
Mhm.
So I would say lean on your practice, but as you know, I actually left social media. I'm a really cold turkey guy, and I don't know if that's the way to do it, but I've heard people give me great advice on, you control your algorithm, just block or remove things. You got to lean on your practices so you could always have time to do the things that you're never bored and you never have fall into the distraction. And if you can't be somewhere like social media, you have to acknowledge that in yourself. I'm one of those people where I've told plenty of people I just don't do well in social media. I like to relate myself to, the kid that's in the lunchroom that doesn't hang out with the cool kids, but I'm still in the room. So that's how I treat social media. You got to find your own little mix, whoever's listening, whoever wants advice. But I would definitely have something to do when your brain starts to kind of run away from itself, and your practices are usually there for you. So if you get home, you don't have to run to your phone if you still have to work out for the day, and that's one of your practices. You would
Right.
just go and go automatically and go do that, or reading, or whatever, or spending time with your kids, or creative time, or any of that stuff that's a practice to you will replace the Facebook scrolling. But just like all addictions, realize that you're hooked on something. Realize that it's bad for you if it's bad for you. Realize when you're getting no value from it, and just cold turkey it or slowly get away from it.
People are addicted to social media. I interviewed somebody, a few episodes ago that is internet addiction expert and we are
Wow.
getting addicted and I think people don't realize that, those urges to go for your phone and you're not consciously choosing to go on your phone instead of reading or working out, but I think like you said becoming aware of that and aware of our relationship with our distractions, whether it's TV, video games, social media, whatever it is, become aware of that and I think coming up with your practices, what's a priority to you and what's not. So how did you come up with your practices and how did you know that they were a priority to you?
Yeah, well, I've kind of been doing these for a while. Fun fact about me, I follow Stoicism a lot. That's my philosophy. That's my operating system. So a lot of these things are a lot of the stuff that Stoics do, and I kind of was just able to organize them to what I run back to whenever I'm derailed. And whenever I'm derailed is when I'm extremely anxious, when my thoughts are not clear, when I seem to have no goal, right? No endpoint, no direction. I'm kind of out at sea, blowing around in the ocean and not getting to my destination. So I found that there was always one of these that always worked for me, right? Whether it was, all right, what's wrong, Jose? Why are you feeling this way? Oh, you're comparing yourself to XYZ. Stop comparing yourself to others. That's a chapter, right? The Stoics always rely on memento mori, right? Which is like embrace death. Understand that it's not something that's scary. It's something that it's finite. It's something that is actually going to help us live a more practical life if we understand that, every moment we're going away, like Seneca said, basically time is already eaten that time that has passed. Every minute that has passed is already owned by death. And these things kind of just bring me back to reality. They literally get me back to my beat. Really, the work of the book was just getting the 15 of them that I do to something that was more consumable. And 10 just seemed like a really good number. And I picked my 10 favorite things, most common things, and I just wrote about them.
Gotcha. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Great. What advice do you have for people or tips for them to come up with their practices?
Where do you see yourself, right? Legacy wise. A lot of people are very fickle, including myself. So I don't want to call nobody out. A lot of people can ring away goals like be worth six figures, or have a house and have this much millions of dollars. Give yourself goals that are not vanity, and give yourself legacy goals, right? Do you want to be able to still functionally move when your kids become of age and when you're able to enjoy retirement? Well, that's going to require me to have some type of fitness or a healthy pillar in my life to allow me to continuously do this, right? Do I want to have really good self-esteem? If I really want to have good self-esteem for my legacy, meaning that my kids can see that, and I can reflect that to them, then I'm going to definitely stop comparing myself to others, right? If I want to enjoy the precious times, if I want to enjoy the moments that I put my kids to bed, the moments where they go off to their first day to do something, I have to understand that it's also going to be the last time that they do something, right? So I have to reflect on my mortality. That's when these things come up, right? And then journaling. What do I want to leave behind if I'm not able to teach? And you notice my trend is my kids. If I'm not able to teach my kids verbally what I want them to know, well, I've gotten into the habit of journaling every single day to one of them specifically. And what my plan is to leave my legacy written down for them so they can actually read this stuff. So it's just whatever your legacy looks like to you, try to adapt habits that are not routine based that you can basically do day in and day out so you can live for the legacy that you envision yourself having.
Oh, yes, that's great. That's great advice. I like that a lot. In chapter 4, you say, exercising every day is the best way to inject difficult challenges into our modern life. But the thing is, I feel like a lot of people don't want to inject difficult challenges in their lives. I think people like things easy. So, what do you say to those people that like they have all these goals, or ideas of what they want their legacy to be, but they just don't want to do difficult things? We have it pretty easy. Everything's at our fingertips. A bunch of people right now are working from home. So what do you say to those people?
Get comfortable being uncomfortable. It's just one of those things where whether you want to resist this or not, it doesn't matter what you think about it. Life doesn't matter what you think about it. But challenges are what mold the individual. They mold the character, they mold the soul, they give you beliefs. It's everything to be challenged because you see what you're about, you see what your wit is, you see what you can stand, what you can't stand, and you basically just become better through every situation. So what I would have to tell people is this one is non-negotiable. You can't have
Mm.
a comfortable life and be able to achieve the things you imagine yourself achieving. It's just impossible to do so. So the faster you can get uncomfortable, and the really cool trick to do to this is doing stuff like this. Get uncomfortable often. Just trick yourself into being uncomfortable all the time. And it'll get easier. But the more you figure out about yourself, the more you figure out how much physical prowess you have and how much you can push and how much pain you can tolerate, either mental or physical, that's when you're going to be able to figure out and go into every situation with as much data as possible. Right. So when you go into like a new business opportunity, the amount of data that you have on yourself going into that decision is going to determine how that decision ends up. So it's important for you to know what you're capable of, what your worth is, to be able to get the best outcome out of that situation. And if you shy away from fear, if you shy away from challenges, I really don't got much to say. It's just going to be a tough life for you because you're not
Mm-hmm.
going to know much about yourself.
Mm-hmm. And I
So
think
yeah,
those are the people that are pretty unhappy too, that don't push themselves or challenge themselves, that they just kind of stay in their comfort zone. And those are
right.
the people that kind of aren't satisfied, but it's kind of a catch 22 because they're nervous or anxious or too self conscious, whatever the issue is, to challenge themselves. But then they're unhappy they're not challenging themselves or bringing themselves to the next stage or their potential.
Absolutely. And fitness is just the easiest way to challenge yourself, right? Like there's tougher ways to
Yes.
challenge yourself. To be drastic, you could like leave yourself in the woods for a week and do something crazy like that. I mean, you could do a lot of things, but the reason I chose fitness every single day is because we can incorporate that, walking upstairs, right? Doing the basics of stuff, walking with our children. We don't have to just be in the gym for 60 minutes, but the challenge of overcoming that mental hurdle of, damn it, I just don't feel like it today. When you're able to overcome that often enough, you really just gain some resilience. You really gain some tolerance. And as you know, as a creator, as a business owner, as somebody who's trying to generate wealth, you need to be consistently able to say yes when your body or your mind is telling you no. That's a
Mm-hmm.
skill to have. And working out every day is just an easy way to build that skill.
So true. And I think that's true about when you challenge yourself in one area of your life and you kind of conquer that challenge, or you see you're making progress, that you kind of gain that confidence in other areas of your life as well.
1,000%. Yeah. I mean, I used to weigh 300 pounds, but like 4 or 5 years ago. And I went down this journey where, it took me about 6 or 8 months of busting my butt every single day, doing stuff that people were telling me was insane. Oh, you're kind of, macro counting food, this and all that. But at the end of the day, I found out a lot about myself.
Mm-hmm.
And now I just have just a bunch more skill that I could, wisdom that I could pass on to friends, peers, my kids. And it was only because I challenged myself. If not, who knows if I would be alive? I mean, 300 pounds, that's a tough place to be.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely. And if you could do that, you could do a lot of other things too. That's a lot of hard work.
exactly. Back to what you said. Yep. It just goes to other areas of your life. You get more confidence. You get more data. You're able to understand who you are. You're not scared. You could take blows. This feeling of derailment is like a wrestling partner, right? Like if you don't show up to fight every single day, then you're gonna tap out. It's gonna tap you out in the mat, and that's really what it is. That's why we have to stay focused on this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Oh, definitely. Definitely. So I think a part of something that holds people back, and this goes into one of your chapters as well, is comparing ourselves to other people. So you
Yeah.
talk about comparing ourselves is really introduced to us at a very early age. We're programmed to get our value from, you mentioned, like things like grades, athleticism, our appearances, and those are the things that we're programmed to learn, that those determine our self-worth. I think that's a part of something that holds people back too, because you look at other people and you're like, well, I'm not even going to try to open my, necklace making shop because there's so many and they're beautiful. Mine aren't going to be as good. I'm not going to have as many followers, whatever. How can people stop comparing themselves then? Because it's so easy to, now more than ever, with social media and everybody posting, their highlights on social media.
Reminders. This stuff is, it gets the best of us at all times. Even the best of minds gets tricked into comparing themselves to others in different avenues, right? If it's, if you're a big high CEO, you're probably comparing your pocket to the other CEO. If you're just an average person like me, you may be comparing, what product they have to what you have. Radio show, podcast, et cetera, et cetera. I think there is no trick here besides due diligence. It's going to happen to us at one point or another. We just have to catch it
Mm-hmm.
and understand that everybody's running a different race, right? And, everybody's at a different chapter,
Mm-hmm.
and just as many people you feel are in front of you in certain chapters, there's just as many behind you. So I don't remember the exact quote off my head, but I know I used a quote from Seneca that says, every time you think about those people ahead of you, just make sure that you remind yourself of the people that are behind you. And that's what I found is a good way to keep me back, once again, from derailment, when I feel like I'm in other people's bags, is what I call it, way too often, right? I'm too concerned with what other people are doing that I don't care for myself. To go back to the Stoics, Marcus said something along the lines of that same thing, which is, we care so much about what others think about us. If we would only care about ourselves just as much, we would be
Yeah.
able to accomplish so much. Due diligence, guys. It's easy to get trapped, but I saw a picture the other day that there was a guy posting saying, hey, I never take economy class when I fly. I'm in first class. Mind you, he didn't notice that there was a guy behind him who took a picture of him taking a picture of the phone, and all the guy did was just move his seat back. So
Uh,
he just took a picture of his feet with his chair
uh-huh.
pushed back and said, yeah, I'm in first class, guys. Understand how pitiful it would be to yourself to see this, know that this guy is lying, and compare yourself to him and feel down because of him. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh man, well, I got to do economy class. Well, shit, things are not going well for me. This guy is lying. Most people on the internet are lying. And we wouldn't get caught in that crosshair or get caught up in this game if we weren't comparing ourselves to those people anyways. Just reminder,
Absolutely.
it's going to happen. I mean, you celebrities, you name it. It's the culture we live in. You see it not so much as when you and I were growing up, I'm sure, but because
Mhm.
now it's a different movement. But you definitely see those like people on the billboards and people in the magazines and people in Hollywood. I'm sure you know all about that, and that you naturally just say, damn, I could never look as good or be as good or sound as good as that
Right.
person right there. It's a slip. Just catch yourself and bounce right back to your beat. Remember that you may not be as good as them, but you will be one day. And there's a lot of people behind you that wish they were as good as you. That's important.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so true. And then even for ourselves, like we didn't start out where we are now. So where we were a year ago, the year before that. And, I just tell people to think about how far you've come. You're not done. You're not done going, So think about where you'll be next year. If you start out your jewelry shop or whatever,
Right.
you start with zero and then, you build on that. And that's how a lot of people are too. But like you said, we don't know everything that's happening in people's lives on the internet. They post a picture, that's all we
Right.
see. So in chapter 7, you explain the importance of having a mentor. But in chapter 2, you also warn against falling prey to charlatans. First off, can you explain what a charlatan is for people who don't know?
Yeah, so charlatan is in original sense is just a con man, right? It's like back in,
Hmm.
let me just say the medieval times just to round it somewhere. But back around those times, there was people that were on the streets in the city square, basically waving these like colorful potions that could have been BS, that could have just been water with food coloring, and promising these extravagant things. Your headache will go away forever if you just try my product. And then they would get, a group of people together in the square in the marketplace because group thinking, right? Like if I can sell 5 of these, then that fear of missing out is going to start to kick in. So a charlatan is basically a snake oil salesman, right? A BSer that is successful because of group thinking, because people just, they're able to pick somebody's pain point out or a certain audience's pain point, and they hit it so well that, I mean, I've fallen for it. You just give up money whenever you can. Yeah. So that's what a charlatan is, a con man.
Yeah, and so this is the thing. I don't know if you've noticed this as well because I know you're not on social media now, but you were.
Mhm.
So, I'm on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and I feel like every profile is now an expert or a coach or a mentor. Like, I feel like it's so hard to tell. Like, so I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I worked in a
Yep.
mental health clinic outpatient for years. So, as a mental health therapist, and I literally had somebody with no credentials whatsoever say that they provide the same services that I do. And I was just like so taken aback because I've gone through so much training, I've gone through graduate school. I literally have to go through 36 hours of training every year or two to keep my license. And then
Right.
here's somebody walking off the street saying, "Oh, like I'm a therapist and I work with people with post traumatic stress disorder." And I just feel like it's so much more common, these like mental health coaches and these financial coaches and these wellness and fitness coaches. It's every profile now. And it's kind of scary to me because there's nobody, there's no board like overseeing these people. And
Right.
so, how do we prevent ourselves from falling prey to that when it's so common now?
I've been down this road. I've paid thousands of dollars for courses that I've gotten nothing for from the same type of people. First of all, kudos to you for keeping up with your credentials and putting all that time in. That's not easy. And I agree, for somebody to just say they do it and not do it, it's a damn shame. To answer your question, though, you kind of got to fall for it a few times, right? You have to kind of see what you're going down. And then you'll start to notice trends, right? You'll start to notice patterns that are like, this is too good to be true. And then just have a little common sense. If somebody's telling you that they're going to make you rich in a month, that's never happened and probably will never happen.
And you're
So
making them rich. Like that's how they're like, "Oh, I'm a financial coach. I
exactly.
specialize in making people six figures," but like you're the ones giving that person the six figures.
Right. With no liability either. Because if they don't get you 6 figures, they say, hey, well, you didn't use my program the correct way, which is just nuts.
Exactly.
I've struggled with this personally because I have a marketing, I do marketing, and I have this thing where if you're an ethical marketer or consider yourself to be an ethical marketer, you're facing an uphill climb from the very beginning. So the guys, unfortunately, that have taken over, like you said, every single profile, the guys that you're going to see more often than none that are going to sell you these products that are going to do nothing are the unethical guys that are just going to give you a catchy headline. They're going to hit you right in your pay point and they're going to ask you for your credit card.
Hmm.
We have to fall for this a bunch of times in order to start seeing the trick before it actually comes to us. We have to question everything. I mean, if somebody is telling you that you're going to get rich in a month, please explain to me how. And then when you watch them explain to you how, you're going to see them, as I've actually wrote in the book, you're going to see them kind of slip in their own pool of BS. because there's only so much you can keep the lot going, right? Fall for it a few times, look out for signs, have your friends help you, right? Like run it by a few people. Hey, like, does this sound too good to be true? What do you think about this? You know, if a charlatan has sold you into buying the product, I don't really think there's anybody that's going to change your mind. You're just going to buy the product. So yeah, and when it comes to mentors, that's the problem. There's too many charlatans out here in order for us to be able to find legit mentors that are actually willing to teach us the valuable stuff. So my argument in the chapter about finding mentors is we have a boatload of history where we can get the greatest of minds, the greatest of people, the greatest of stories, people that have overcome more than we can ever overcome in our lives. Their story is there on paper for us to observe, for us to learn from, the good, the bad, the extraordinary. You can't be lied to from somebody who A, is already dead, but B, has their estate has no bearing on whether Jose succeeds or fails, right? These charlatans need you to buy into their program for them to succeed. Somebody who lived 2,000 years ago that passes on some wisdom that's, useful today does not care whether you succeed or fail. It has no relevancy, which is why I'm big on stoicism and I'm big on that whole philosophy, because they were trying to solve the problems of life. Nowadays, people are trying to sell you, the solution to problems in life. I can definitely get a nice program, hey, some Tony Robbins course that's going to get me all pumped up. And that's all stuff is useful. It's fantastic. It really is. But if you really want unbiased wisdom, if you really want examples of how to carry yourself, your virtues, you have to look no further than, history, books. The library is a general form, but audio books, anything you can get. Because for somebody to be able to encapsulate all their discoveries in, say, like an 85-year life and be able to put it in a book for me, they have just literally given me a time machine. I'm able to absorb 85 years of life and maybe one sitting or two sittings. There's nobody online that can give me that experience, no matter how much they can charge.
Yeah, it's tough. I would say that too. I agree, because it's so hard to tell nowadays who's qualified and unqualified.
For sure.
So I like your suggestion a lot. It's tough when you don't know what's real and what's not. That's a tough spot to be in right now.
That's why reading is a huge pillar for me. My wife will tell me literally all the time when she sees me get frustrated, she'll literally tell me, hey man, have you go read some stoicism? Have you, picked up Meditations as Marcus Aurelius's journal? I carry it around with me in my backpack and everything. And that's why it made it into this book, into the top 10, is because I can't really explain to you the amount of times that I've been going through something that I think is untoppable. Like, this is insane. I can open up a page in Meditations and just literally grab an insert and be like, wow, this completely just changed this upside down and allowed me to push forward. And I don't think that's an accident. I think these guys were really trying to address real life situations. Marcus Aurelius was the emperor of Rome at one point. So this isn't just, a modest civilian who needed to explore life. This was a guy that could have literally laid on his ass all day and gotten fat and corrupted the people and debased their currency and done all these crazy stuff. On the other hand, he was the only ever philosopher king to ever exist. And he wrote in this journal that I'm assuming he never thought would ever see the light of day. And here we have, his writings down in this journal, 2,000 years later. And anybody listening, you don't have to buy my book. You don't have to buy, modern philosopher books, but if you can just go check out Meditations from Marcus Aurelius or On the Shortness of Life by Seneca, these books will literally just transform your life.
Wow, that's awesome. And I'm going to link to those in the show notes. Definitely. I want to check those out. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. For Meditations, and I'll give you links, just remind me of Gregory Hayes' translation is the best translation for Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. He gives you like a little preface on who Marcus was and who he grew up with before you actually get into the content itself. It's really good.
Oh, great. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I definitely want to check that out for sure. I've been trying to meditate a lot more. I'm pretty bad at it, so I try to do it before bed. But so I've been trying to do that a lot more. I've been trying to do more mindfulness. Definitely, it's helpful. So yeah.
I'm trying to get into meditation as well. I guess it's not a practice for me. I guess I keep building excuses if the situation is not right. I don't know if you feel this way, but I try to start meditating and I get weirded out when I hear people around. Like I think I'm getting caught doing something weird. So I'll just stop and be like, all right, leave the room if it's one of my kids or something. But gotta meditate. I recommend to anybody listening, start your day with a little stoicism. There's a lot of stuff like the Daily Stoic Journal and stuff like that. This podcast for it. These Stoics, they were realists in life when it comes to that sense. They understood that we're emotional human beings and it's all perception. It's all how we see things and it's all how we react to the things that happen to us. Very good wisdom to start the day with.
Always good to start your day off on that kind of note for sure. Keep things in perspective, like you said. Chapter 10 is, I feel like, a big one because you talk about burnout culture, and I feel like we're just entrenched in it right now. So, can you explain to us what you mean by that?
Yeah, burnout culture is it's many different things, but it's what everybody thinks it is. It's that type of environment where we feel we're not doing enough, right? Where we feel no matter how much work we do, no matter how much time we spend, no matter we're racing this clock, right? Is that feeling of being burnt out all the time, and we don't realize it. For most of us, it becomes second nature, especially us side hustlers, is what I call us. People that still have a day job and people that have to pay their bills, but also come home to pursue their passions.
Mm-hmm.
Some of us, have kids and families and different priorities, sort of like a juggler. We never understand the limit of how many balls we can actually juggle.
Mm-hmm.
So we're juggling, let's say our limit is 10, we're juggling all 10. And then for some weird reason, we have this tendency, society seems to push us towards the direction on, hey, let me add an 11th ball. Let me add a
Yes.
12th ball. I got this. It's okay. And usually we end up crashing. We end up derailed. I keep going back to that concept because this is literally what happens. We just get off our beat. And if we just know when to cool it down, right? If we know, what's enough, if we know when to keep ourselves in check, then we could always stay with the 10 balls, back to that example, and not have to carry an 11 for a 12. We just have to manage the 10 we have. And burnout culture is when we try to add more than we can handle, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I feel like so many people are just walking around so burnt out right now.
And don't even know it. They think it's normal.
Yeah.
Yeah, they get sold this dream of being an entrepreneur, where it's like, entrepreneurs are supposed to stay up till 4 a.m. and have their eyes bleeding out of their head and don't sleep. And there could be guys and ladies that function that way, but I tell you 1,000%, I can't function that way, and I would fall apart if I continue to do work at the rate that I do it now. When you're racing towards a deadline and when you're racing towards a goal, there's nothing wrong with challenging ourselves and pushing and doing that stuff. But if this becomes like a yearly thing, right? If it starts to destroy relationships around you, if it starts to destroy your marriage, if it starts to destroy the time you spend with your kids and all that stuff, it's only up to you to address that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you fall into the addiction of burnout, then you will always have that next project. You will always have that next dollar to make. You will always have, that next goal that needs to be toppled. I've seen this happen not only in finance, by the way. I've actually known individuals personally that have gotten engaged and literally have broken up that engagement because one of them spends way too much time in the gym.
Oh,
So
wow.
a burnout is a burnout, regardless of what field it is. You could be the healthiest person in the world, but if your wife hates you because you picked the gym over her, you're going to be the unhappiest person in the world.
Right.
We have to realize what burnout is, and we have to, shift away from it, balance ourselves, and prioritize, which is what our practices should do. It should get us back into our beat and understand that if we want to be family centric individuals, that maybe spending time with our loved ones is more vital to us than doing whatever, that meeting for 2 hours. If I want to quit my day job and work on my passions and all that stuff, then maybe I'm going to have to put an hour or two after work, but no more, and spread out my days. That type of deal. We're balancing, but we're still achieving our goals. But burnout is obvious. Just go through your social media feed. Everybody's stressed out because they're burnt out.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So many people. Yeah. Oh, definitely. And I think,
Yeah.
like you said, learning our limits, becoming aware of when we're burnt out, because so many people don't know they're walking around burnt out. So becoming aware of that,
Yep.
seeing how our relationships are affected. Yeah. It's so, so important. You talk about also how balancing and finding middle ground is something that we should work on and how it's actually a skill. So do you have any tips for people on how they can develop that skill?
A lot of practice is one of those things when your priorities are taken care of, everything else is a plus. So I would definitely say take care of your priorities on a legacy level. I always like to remind people of that because people don't understand how much, if you burn yourself out for 6 hours working on your side hustle at night, how much there's a tipping point to money and how much it makes you unhappy after a certain point. Once you prioritize the things you want, like physical fitness, your workout, your health, and all that stuff, everything else is a plus. And you can kind of just go, if you want to spend a little time on this, do that. But what I would say is, I know it sounds cliche, lean on those practices. They're always going to get you back to what it is you're supposed to be doing. And when you get back to what it is you're supposed to be doing, you're less anxious. You're less angry at the world. You start to see the world in brighter colors instead of black and white. And that's super important to get back on your beat. To answer your question, just take care of your priorities first. The things that you want on a legacy level, not on a macro level. And everything else will just be a plus. And when everything else is a plus, it takes all the pressure off of that stuff.
Awesome. So we just went over a few of your 10 chapters. Is there anything else you want people to know before they buy your book and where they can buy your book and when it's coming out?
I want people to know that the stuff that they think is uniquely happening to them is absolutely by no stretch of the imagination unique to them. We all go through the stuff that's in this book, the tactics, the tools, is meant to be used just like, a mechanic uses his tools, right? It's something you're supposed to be able to listen to with an audiobook or pull out and be able to apply the right tool for the right situation. But what we need to understand is no matter which tool we use, derailment is actually something that's happening, right? It's something that gets us off our beat. And when we get off our beat, it's very hard for us to get back on it, and we're only comfortable and we're only happy when we're on that beat. So my suggestion to anybody, if they were to buy my book, is just understand that when you're anxious and frustrated, you're most likely derailed. And the simple solution is just to get right back on your beat. Like they say, get back on the horse if you fall off the horse, and you'll see that things start to align themselves as they go. As for where they can get the book is going to be out on St. Patrick's Day, 3/17. That's my youngest son's birthday. It's going to be on Amazon. You can pick up the Kindle edition. You could get the paperback. And I don't have a link for it yet. I'll leave it with you, Des. But there's going to be an option to be able to get the book and the audiobook from me direct before the release date. You can always follow me on Facebook. I'm Jose Burgos. On Twitter, I'm at Defbed, DEFBED. But I'll be honest with you, as you heard in this conversation, I'm not really a big social media guy. I just like to tap in every now and then and say hello to anybody following. But if you want any information on the latest, the podcast that I do, any of that good stuff, just follow me on those places or keep an eye around with Des. And I'm sure Des will have some of my stuff in her orbit.
Oh, definitely. I'm going to put all of your links in my show notes because everyone should definitely follow you. You're always having so many words of wisdom. And I read your book. I loved your book. I highly recommend it to everybody. At the time of this recording, your book will be out the 17th. This is going to be posted the 18th. So it will have come out yesterday. So I will have those links in the show notes. So excited. So everyone, definitely go check out Jose's book. Jose, thank you so much. This was awesome. Thank you for explaining some of your chapters and going a little deeper in there and giving people a little preview. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much for having me here, Des. Always a pleasure to talk, whether on or off a podcast. I love everything that you're doing with your community and the people that follow you. I just picked up your mindfulness journal. I haven't broken open it yet, but I already know it's going to be fantastic, and I'm going to get a ton of value from that. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. And let me know what you think. I'm so glad that you were able to grab that. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Thank you so much, Jose, for purchasing my gratitude journal. I really appreciate that. That was so nice of you. You guys all can check out my gratitude journal in the links below. I'm putting it in the show notes. It's currently on Etsy, so you could purchase it there. It's a 7-day gratitude journal. So thank you for that, Jose. You all need to check out Jose's book, Derailed. I loved it. And like I said in the interview, I resonated with so much of it. So I highly, highly recommend it. You can find the link in the show notes to purchase his book. I think it's very valuable, very helpful. I think you will find a lot of value in it, and I think it will resonate with you too. I picked it up and I couldn't put it down. So that says something because I'm a very, very slow reader and it's really hard to grab my attention. And I'm ashamed to say, but I typically open a book and start it and never finish it. It's really, really hard for me to get through a book. So that I got through Jose's in no time actually says a lot. So that is my recommendation for you. Jose, thank you so much for coming on and deep diving into your book with us. And I wish you all the success. And I'm sure I will have you on again for your second book. All right. Thank you for listening. Make sure you subscribe and review this podcast. Share this episode with a friend if you found it valuable. I will see you in 3 weeks because in 2 weeks I will be away. So I will post the next episode the week after. And you're going to want to tune in for that because I interviewed Patty Negri. She has a show on the Travel Channel and she is a psychic medium. So it was a really, really great interview and I can't wait for you to hear it. Oh, and also before I go, definitely sign up for my email list because I've been putting out an email every week, sometimes twice a week. So definitely check that out. It goes much deeper than my Facebook group does. And I'm pretty much non existent on Instagram at this point. I do have to get back into that. But yeah, I talk a lot and I go really deep in my email list. And I do have a few email challenges if you're interested. So definitely sign up for my email list. Again, the link is in the show notes. All right. Talk to you in a few weeks.